Nation of Fit in 10. It is day 44. It is a rainy day. It doesn't feel like summer. I guess it's not summer yet, right? What are we? June. What are we? My computer says June 13th. We are June 13th. We are day 44. And we still have 26 days to go, right? 26 days. You can still make some really good change. Of course, I sent your numbers to you yesterday. There wasn't any changes to any numbers with the exception of just a couple people, okay? So just keep that in mind, all right? Most of you, almost every single person in this challenge, there was no change to your numbers. No change to anything, not this week, but certainly next week there will be some, okay? Let's get to more of your feedback, which hopefully you sent me that today, or will send it to me today, because today is the day that you're supposed to send me your feedback, okay? Okay, is there anything you would like me to cover in this week's video series? Okay, so there was a question yesterday, or maybe I may have started this question a couple days ago. So let me just run through the whole question here, and I'm going to answer the end of it because I already answered some of these. So the question is this: when the challenge ends and we are trying to maintain our new weight rather than lose weight or lose fat, right? Let's make that clear. As is the case now, what is the ration of protein to fat to carbohydrates? I don't even know if I answered that question yet. What is the ratio of fats, carbohydrate, protein, and maintenance weight program? All right, so a huge question here. So let's just go back here a little bit, because I know I already talked about the first part of this question. What is the ration of protein to fat and carbohydrate? Okay, generally speaking, what I like to recommend for protein-wise, we should have at least a gram to a gram and a half per pound of lean body mass. So a one gram, that's a bare minimum, to 1.5 is very reasonable. You could go higher than that, and I certainly have. But I don't think it's really that necessary. 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass. And I say this because your lean body mass can change over time. Okay, so now, in terms of the protein that you're having right now, you are in that range. Okay, you're in the lower range, but you're in that range, okay? Now, when it comes to fat and carbohydrates, those are energy sources, right? Essentially. Well, carbohydrates are definitely an energy source. Fat is an energy source, but fat also plays many roles in the body, right? Structural roles, that is, right? It plays a part in every cell membrane. It, as we talked about, plays a role in certain hormones. That is the underlying structure of certain hormones. It plays a role in the lining of our nervous system, our brain, etc. There's lots of things that fat does for us. Carbohydrates don't have that role at all. Okay, so but that's not to say that carbohydrates are not important, right? They are a primary source of fuel. They are the easiest fuel source. That is, it's the easiest way to raise blood glucose is through essentially glucose itself, right? Which is what carbohydrates are at the end of the day once you break them down, with the exception of fiber. Okay, well, obviously not all carbohydrates are glucose, but they're very close to glucose. Like maybe they're fructose or something like that. So the question is, how much of these do we need? Well, really, we have to look at the amount of calories that you're having. So if we figure out the amount of protein that we're going to eat, which you guys have a ballpark now, I mean, it's changing week to week or every couple weeks, but you have an idea of what to take in for protein, right? All right, so whether it's, let's say you start off at 100 and you end up at the end of the challenge with 120 grams, which would be something that's very possible. Staying in that range would be very reasonable for you. Okay, so again, staying in that protein range that I gave you. When it comes to fat and carbohydrates, again, this is going to be very dependent on, well, the amount of exercise that you're doing. So if you were to keep up with the amount of exercise that you're currently doing, having the amount of calories that you're currently having right now would be reasonable. It wouldn't be unreasonable. Okay? But again, as I said, I think I said this in yesterday's video, we're dealing with a moving target. So, these are things that can adjust through time. And as I mentioned yesterday, you want to always make small changes, any changes that you do. So what you can do, just as an example, is you could take your week 5 or 6 macros, and you could just have those, every day, day in, day out. And then maybe you might say over time, maybe you just want to see if you can add in a bit more food without seeing any repercussions. And sometimes you can do this, especially if you've been in a deficit for some time and you've been really stringent with it. You can get away with adding in a bit of food and not having any repercussions, for some time. So, adding in a small percentage of food, 5% more in calories or something like that, okay? When it comes to the ratio of fat and carbohydrates, so let's put protein aside because we already talked about that. Again, it's going to depend on the person, to be honest with you. It's going to depend on their needs. It's going to depend on whether they're trying to lose weight or maintain weight. And this is something that you can play with. Some people will do will do protein, and then the rest of their calories will be fat. And some people will do all carbohydrate. Well, they won't do that. You'll have some weird issues happening if you didn't have any fat in your diet. Like if you were just to have a no fat diet, you would see you'd have some definitely what we I guess could consider side effects from that. So I wouldn't suggest that, and it'd be very hard to do that regardless, though, right? But you could certainly do 0 carbs and just fat and protein if you wanted to. But if you think that there's a difference really between you getting your energy sources from all fat, or like you think you're going to get leaner from following a low carbohydrate diet, there's really no evidence of this. Okay, so as I've said from the get-go, you want to make sure you get an adequate amount of calories, right? So your calories are going to be made up of hopefully all carbohydrates. You're going to include carbohydrates, fats, and protein. So all those things contain energy. Those are going to make up your calories. But if you've got X amount of calories and a certain amount of those are protein, then what are the rest of your calories going to be? A mix of carbohydrates and fats. That's what I recommend. What is that ratio going to be? It's up to you. But you have those calories right there, and I just recommend to get some fat and carbohydrates, because fats certainly play a role, and you don't want to go fatless in a diet, which is very hard to do, by the way, which I already said. So you want to make sure you get some fat there, and then some carbohydrates if you want. You could do all fat, like I said. You don't have to do any carbohydrates really. Your body can adapt to that. But it just, in my mind, it just makes your diet harder, right? Like, to me, the most feasible diet is the diet that gives you the most range of food to eat. You have all spectrums of foods to eat. That makes more sense to me. Like, why would you want to cut things out? It just makes it harder, makes things way harder, right? Why would you do that when you don't have to, right? So that's one of the reasons I do this. Why I include, fat, carbohydrates, and protein. So again, if you want to drop your calories from some of your energy sources, your carbohydrates and fats. If you want to increase, I would increase those areas as well if you want to increase your calories, okay? But your protein right now is very reasonable. But, arguably, if your calories do go down, that would be the point at which maybe you would actually increase your protein a little bit, because you'll burn more protein. You'll burn through more protein. If you had a super high protein diet and you increased your calories, you could consider lowering your protein a little bit, because those extra calories, especially carbohydrates, are going to be protein sparing, right? So, but again, what is the ratio? Really, we're dealing here with, again, an adequate amount of protein, which I already told you what that is, right? And then a certain amount of calories. And what those like other calories, fats and carbohydrates, right? As to what ratio those are, I don't think it makes a difference. Okay. All right. I think I said enough on that. I know you guys want me to give you some like this is exactly what you need, right? But nobody can tell you that. Like I don't care I don't care who the person is, how many degrees they have. They can't tell you that, right? So this is just something, and this is why I try to educate you guys more by you getting to know food, and then you having an idea of what happens if we just eat a reasonable diet and we make a small adjustment through time. You can see what happens, right? Without starving yourself. Okay. There's so much I can say on this, to be honest with you. I could just sit here and talk about this for quite some time, but let's move on here to the message of the day. The message of the day is sometimes you just have to get going to get going. Sometimes you just got to get going to actually get going. Okay? And this is something, again, I do put a lot of stuff in here that applies to me. I'm hoping that this applies to some of you. I'm sure it does. But what I mean by this one here is, it's like you just can't get your day going for whatever reason. But once you just force yourself to get one thing done, then it gets the motor going, and you can just get through more tasks after that. But sometimes it's just that first task that is really hard to do, and it's just like you just got to be like, okay, let's, if I'm talking to myself, like, okay, let's just get going, Mark. Let's go, right? Let's go. Let's move forward, right? Let's get this thing done that's really not that hard to get done. And then that just helps you move forward with other things you have to get done. So sometimes, and this is one reason why I like to do cardio first thing in the morning, because you don't, if you do something like cardio first thing in the morning, and I'm not a big fan of cardio. So, but if you just decide that you can do it first in the morning, you don't even have time to really think about doing it. You just wake up and you just do it, right? So anyway, sometimes you just got to get in the rhythm. You just got to go and start doing something, and that will get you in action to doing more, right? So sometimes you just got to get going to get going, right? Sometimes doing gets you motivated, right? Sometimes doing gets you motivated, will get you motivated, okay? All right, positive energy, positive vibes, believe in yourself. It's already 13 minutes, oh my God. Positive energy, positive vibes, believe in yourself, for love, God, give gratitude. I will talk to you all very soon. See you guys.